So if folks online struggle to hear us at any point, please let us know or raise your hand. But we'll go ahead and call this joint committee meeting of the Ordinance and Charter Change Committees to order. It's May 4th at 6:07 p.m. My name is Ben Travers, City Council from Ward 5, and I'm the chair of the Ordinance Committee. It is my privilege to co-chair this process with, you want to introduce yourself, Gene? I think for the most part we all know each other here, but
I am Gene Bergman. I am the chair of the Charter Change Committee, so the other half of the joint committee. And I'm very pleased to be here to kick this off and look forward to the robust, as the resolution called for, conversation that we will have.
thank you, Gene. So also from the Ordinance Committee, we have Councilor Shannon from the South District. Joan, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. I've just introduced you, but
Well, assuming you don't want a full bio, I think that's probably fine.
that's enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor Carpenter, jointly here in both your role as a member of the Ordinance Committee and the Charter Change Committee. Councilor Hightower online from Ward 1, member of the Ordinance Committee, and Councilor Doherty from the East District, member of the Charter Change Committee. So there are 6 of us here. I think.
You want to introduce the commissioners?
Yeah, so that's my next step here. No, appreciate that. So I think, Councilor Bergman, tell me if you feel differently about this, but I think our intention, and one of the reasons online we promoted everyone to panelists here, is that we do want this to be, as Councilor Bergman noted, and as noted in the resolution that created this committee, a robust process with a lot of community engagement. We want all sorts of different stakeholders, folks online, the folks here in the room, to feel like they have an opportunity to participate. And so the agenda this evening is one where once we give folks in the room an opportunity to introduce themselves, the members of the joint committee, like the intention here is that each one of us, to the extent we have something to say at this moment, would be able to take a couple minutes just to give an initial overview of what they're hoping to get out of this process, and perhaps if they have any sort of brief substantive thoughts on the items to dive into that question as well. We then want to the extent folks here, whether other councilors or commissioners or any member of the public or other stakeholders here want to weigh in on what they're hoping to get out of this process or see the committee do. We certainly want to give any member outside of this committee who wants to say something an opportunity to speak. And then we do have a hard stop this evening at 7:30. So the hope is that we'll then be able to double back to the councilors on this committee to discuss really next steps for the meetings that we have scheduled going forward and how we expect those meetings may look. Does that all make sense to you?
Yes, yes. I mean, just to be clear, we'd start with the committee members, the joint committee members, those brief comments, and then open it up to public comments from everybody and anybody. And there are counselors who are on. Councilor Grant is there. There'll be maybe others, other commissioners, and then after we go through all of the public comment, then we would circle back.
Great. So before jumping into those comments, I think if folks are open to it, we'd like to go around the room and give other people an opportunity to introduce themselves. Commissioner Rao, can we start with you?
Sure. Nice to be here. Nice to meet some of the people. I've met some of you, but not every. Sorry. Now the co-chair of the Burlington Police Commission. I've been on the commission since November. I think that's when I got appointed. So thank you all for having me here.
Great, thanks. Why don't we go to the back of the room, Chief?
I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm John Murad. I'm the acting chief of police. Can we ask you to come closer so I don't feel you're part of like this conversation? Would that be sure? I didn't think, I thought it was just a yes, but yeah, happy. So we're all more than yes as well as yes. Thank you.
I'm Dave Marr, Ward 4.
Thanks, Ed.
Just regular guy.
Why we're here.
Hi, Anthony, everyone. Joe McGee, Ward 3 City Councilor.
I'm Amy Malnowski, I live in Ward 1. I'm part of People for Peace kind of.
I'm Joe Dempsey, City Attorney's Office staff, Ward 6.
And thank you for being here, Joe. I really appreciate it. Can we turn online and Kim, perhaps start with you?
Yes, Kim Sturdivant, acting city attorney, and I staff both committees and just out sick, so zooming in today. So thank you, Joe, again, for being there in person.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate your being here, even though not feeling well, and hope you feel better soon.
Thanks.
Just going around the screen, Andy, could we go to you now?
Sure. My name is Andy Blanchett. I'm the president of AFSCME 1674, which is the Howard Center Workers Union.
Great. Councilor Grant?
Hi, Councilor Grant, Central District for Wards 2 and 3, and a former police commissioner, and I also formerly served on the special committee to review policing policies.
Thank you. Commissioner Oski?
Hi, thanks for having me. This is Jessica Oski. I'm a police commissioner and I live in Ward 5.
Thank you. And I think there are some other panelists who we can't see because we have non-video participants hidden, but I think, yeah, Jordan, I think we saw you log on. You're muted.
Yes, I'm on my phone, so I'm just
Are you still there, Jordan? Well, we may have lost Jordan, but Jordan Riddell, Chief of Staff from the Mayor's Office. Okay, was there anyone else on the participant side who, oh, and Councilor Paul, I don't know if you want to go ahead and, I think you're the only one who hasn't gone yet. If you're there and want to introduce yourself, but I do see Council President Paul has joined us as well. All right. So, Gene, I think with those introductions that, well, we do have, I guess, some formal business to attend to, which is item 1 on our agenda is to adopt the agenda. Is our motion to adopt the agenda? So moved by Councilor Carpenter, seconded by Councilor Shannon. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimously adopted. That takes us to item 2 on our agenda, which is titled Review of Committee Materials and Initial Councilor Comments. The materials posted to board docs are not an exhaustive list of the dialogue that's taken place in our community over the last 3 years, the issue of oversight and accountability, but I think gives us some important places in time as to the discussion that's happened to date, at least in a formal capacity, and may or may not lead our discussion going forward tonight and looking forward. So I hope folks have had an opportunity to review those documents, really starting from the proposed charter change from both the council as well as the mayor's office in 2020, the veto of that charter change, an ordinance passed by the council in late 2021 that outlined a potential process for the police commission to expand its oversight role, some draft language of that ordinance change, and a formal response from at least the police commission at that time. And of course, one of the reasons and one of the big reasons we're here today is that this discussion was prompted by a citizen initiative to put question 7 on the ballot with charter language that looked similar with some tweaks to the charter change that the council passed in 2020. And that's sort of the most recent point in time in a document that's on the agenda here. I think that's an outline of the documents.
Did we include the resolution that created this this committee as well, or no?
yes.
Yes,
I think
that is on the list.
So that would be the final document.
That is the final document.
Gives us the framework.
Yep. So I don't know. I mean, I've done most of the talking. I'm happy to continue with my own thoughts on this, or if there's another counselor that wants to kick things off with respect to their couple minutes. I'm there open to.
We just want to get right out on the table what the joint committee is thinking, but briefly, so that then we can delve into the stuff and somebody should. Sarah.
Okay, just trying to read all through those attachments. I would say there has been, and over the last 2.5 years, a lot of conversation and discussion of the original proposal that the mayor vetoed and then ballot item 7. So that's gotten a lot of public time. What hasn't got much public time was the work that kind of happened in between with the Public Safety Committee at the time and the Police Commission at that time. So I'm just sort of throwing that out there. For me, that's the conversation that I'm not familiar with. So I'd like to put that kind of high on our agenda to invite back or to the table the people who did that work, to synopsize it and tell us kind of where they think they were at when that kind of got put on hold.
Great. I see Councilor Hightower has her hand raised, and then Councilor Shannon.
Great, thanks. Less so in needs. I think just in terms of prioritizing, I think it would just be good if we, and I don't know if this is something that like Ben and Jean want to do before the next meeting, but I just want to be very clear about what we are trying to do with this and what we're not trying to do, just so we don't get too lost. We could spend a lot of time debating a lot of different things. And if we've got some things that we want to come out of this, then I think focusing on like getting the framework in place. So that means like, are we talking about an ordinance, or are we talking about a charter change? Do we need to have one before we have the other? Are we talking about investigatory discipline, like the 3 sections of the thing? And there was one more big question. Oh, are we talking about sticking with the police commission, or are we talking about another body? So I think just getting some clarity on where we are at as a body on those things and what we want to cover before we just delve into materials, because I think that could help us be a little bit more focused, so that people know I like my efficiency, as efficient as possible.
Great.
Thank you.
Joan?
I think that there's, I would like us to first understand our current system and then determine what we like, what we don't like about our current system. So better identify what we're trying to change. And I've participated in these processes since the committee to review policing policies in 2019. I forget what they're actually called, but in that policies and practices, okay, which Milo also served on. And in that committee, we got a tremendous amount of education about, what the training of officers is and policies, and it's a lot. And I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't think that actually that's where we need to go with this committee. But I do think understanding the current disciplinary structure, where it's succeeded, where it has failed, will be helpful. And in all of this process that has gone on so far, and as we can see on our agenda, it's a lot, but it has not been inclusive of those most directly impacted by it, which would be the police officers. And I think we need to think about how we want to engage police officers, not just the chief, not just the head of the union, but is there a way that nobody working at the police department right now has extra time on their hands? So is there a way that we can engage them by survey? How would they like to be engaged? Maybe the chief and the head of the union can you know, talk with them about how they would like to be engaged in this process, because I think what we don't want to do is create an adversarial process. I think we want a collaborative process with everybody at the table. And I'm not sure how to actually make that happen.
Thank you for that. Sam or Jean, any additional thoughts? Okay, how about you?
You may, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Jean?
Yeah, let's see if I can. I really appreciate the comments that folks have made, because you know they resonate with my thoughts. And when I start, and many of the questions were asked, I look at the resolution that created this, and so it says that we're going to look at these documents, the ballot initiative, the charter amendment proposed by the administration in December of 20, the council's 21 resolution and associated ordinance, and for us to have a robust review. I think that that's really appropriate. And we talk about the committee receiving input on the disciplinary authority of the chief, the oversight role of the commission, and the possible creation of an oversight body, which is separate from the department. And the last thing that we're charged with is to bring back proposed legislation by June 1st. So my first initial comment is that June 1st is an unrealistic date. If we're going to have a robust input, and if we're going to do all of the other work that counselors have to do, like the budget. So we just need to make that, I think, really clear. I really agree with Joan when she talks about us having a meaningful conversation, which is based on our city's specific needs, that goes to many of the things that she just talked about, as well as being conducted and involving people who are most impacted. And that includes in part, not in full, but in part, the officers that we have working for us. So I would actually just throw out the thought of us, and maybe we have to come back to the council with a resolution, but pushing the deadline back to, say, the first meeting in September. I think anything sooner than that is a railroad, and I don't hear any appetite just to get it done to sweep this off the table. I see everybody as being totally committed to getting this right. And if we can get consensus, God, that would be an amazing and wonderful thing. I have got some substantive things which I won't go into because I want to listen to other folks about it. But I would say that the charge that we have, I think, in answer to Zariah's question, leaves open the possibility of us focused on an investigatory and an auditing and monitoring body or bodies or functions, one of them or the other of them. I think that it's going to need to include a level of transparency right at the outset, as well as substantive due process and procedural due process. And we heard that throughout the campaign about how important that is. And I think that we just need to have that as part of our thinking. So that is a piece of our understanding, and the capacity. The last point I would just say is trying to be mindful of all that we want to do. The capacity of the commission, at least as we have it right now, to actually do the work that we hope that they will do, and to do it well. And so that means looking at resources, it means looking at numbers, it means maybe being creative in terms of the structures that we come up with, whether it's a single body or it's all within a police commission, but there's just a lot of work to be done. So it's not necessary that the same people are doing all of the work. It could be, but I don't know that we are hamstrung by that. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you very much, everyone, for those thoughts. Yeah,
Just one other point, this is along with Joan's comment about learning what we have now, and both Councillor Hightower and I sit on the Human Resources Committee, and I chair it, and we actually had a little short conversation the other day around how does discipline in general work in the city, and how is the police department different or similar, and I just think that might give us some guidance to get stuff. And for instance, the HR committee sits on level 2, I think it's called level 2 complaints. So, you know, how does that sort of relate? And Karen Durfee, I think, should be invited to sort of discuss that stuff.
yeah. So I think all those comments are very well taken. I think we'll provide an opportunity for sort of other stakeholders and members of the public to weigh in as well, and then double back to next steps. I think as part of that next step discussion, personally, I think a part of that should be our deciding at our next meeting, do we have a dedicated agenda item to what you're talking about, Sarah? And whether or not that's Karen Durfee, or whether or not I was actually talking to Jordan earlier about this. Perhaps Jared Pellerin from the city attorney's office, who I know is very well versed in the different bargaining agreements and their grievance and arbitration processes, maybe would be someone to come and speak to about that. So I think we can reserve that discussion for what the next steps are, because multiple people brought up questions around, for example, hearing from folks who have been diving into this issue over the last couple of years. I know I'm very glad to have Commissioner Rao, Commissioner Oski here from the Police Commission. I heard from Stephanie Seguino earlier today, and I know hearing from her that the Police Commission would very much like to come in their formal role to give a more in-depth presentation as to their review of this issue. So I think we can come back to that. I have some substantive thoughts about this as well, Gene, but to go along with you, I think I'll hit pause on those for the moment so we can hear from other folks here. I do agree with you that June 1 is too ambitious of a timeline, so I'm happy to hear you say September. I think maybe we could get it done sooner than September, but I think September is a date that gives us enough bandwidth to do that work. I think sort of very high level here. I think we've heard the community weigh in on this issue in various respects, including most recently on town meeting day. But I don't necessarily take the results of that vote as an indication that our community does not want us to take further action on community oversight and accountability. So I am hopeful that we come out of this not with a result that's simply falling back on the status quo, but that we come out of this with a proposal that hopefully has broad consensus and buy-in from most, if not all, of the stakeholders here, not the least of which being the police department and its members. I think, you know, there's a couple sort of charter truths here that we are locked into. One of those being that our charter says that it's the chief of police that controls discipline within the police department. And the other piece is it says that our police commission is the body that sits in the role of an appellate body when an officer is appealing a disciplinary decision of the chief. So to go back to Councillor Hightower's point, I think if we need a charter change, it will be to the end of, from my perspective, focusing in on those two questions. Do we want to change the disciplinary role of the chief of police, in which case we'll need to look at a charter change? Do we want to change the role of the police commission as sitting as an appellate body, in which case we would need a charter change? South of that, I think we have a lot of flexibility to work within an ordinance to consider different possibilities here. I think even the draft ordinance language that the city attorney's office put together was able to consider a role for the police commission as an investigatory body while still maintaining its charter role as being a body that would hear appeals. And there was a process laid out in the draft language there where the police commission would basically be split in halves, where there would be an investigatory half and an appellate half. And so I'll be interested to dive back into that question to the extent we're interested in focusing on one body, the police commission, or two. But I think we have a lot in front of us here. I'm looking forward to the discussion to come. Councillor Hightower, I saw is your hand raised again before we sort of turn to other folks here?
Oh, I know Milo also had her hand raised, but happy to go first if we're doing ordinance or charter first.
I think if we can keep it to the members of the committee first, and then we'll turn to Councillor Grant.
Okay. Oh, what was I gonna say? Shoot. I actually forgot. So I do, I know that there's a lot of possibility. I do think that starting with disciplinary authority for maybe focusing on that for the next meeting is good, just because I think that's the one that's the most charter heavy, maybe in terms of like, we know that like, if we don't want to go with the status quo, we know that that's something that will have to change within the charter. I'd also be curious to hear, based on the discussion that we've just had, the acting chief's thoughts on how we do, like, as much as I'm like, okay, we won't make it by the June deadline. I do think we need to do this quickly. And so what kind of the most efficient and effective way is to get feedback from police officers on what works for them. And just for what it's worth, I feel like when we talk about a charter change, I feel like I think one of the principles that we want to use, not that just cause has passed yet, which who knows when and if that will happen, but I think that's about the level of specificity that we want to go for. Like, I want it to be I guess just to get us towards like an end goal, is I want it to be clear, and I want it to be enough detail that folks know what to expect, but still give us flexibility. I think one of the things that we might want to consider in that, sorry, I'm just throwing things out because I think this is the stuff we're going to start discussing, so there's no point in waiting, is vesting that authority within the police commission to the extent possible. I think the charter should be flexible enough that if, 10 years down the road, we want to create a separate body, that's possible, but that's not mandated. So I just want us to have flexibility within the charter to have it both ways, because I don't think we're ready as a community right now to have 14 people who have a lot of knowledge on understanding our police department, but I think we already have 7. But I think we could get to a point where we have 14 people. So yeah, I'm hoping for flexibility, hoping that we can have it be the police commission early on, but that we have the flexibility in the charter language to not necessitate that it's the police commission. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll have an opportunity after public comment to come back to councilors on the committee, but just are there any other councilors on the committee that have any brief comments before we turn to, I think we would turn to Councilor Grant, and then I'd suggest then turning to Jordan from the mayor's office, and then perhaps to the chief, and then other folks who are here. Anyone else on the committee have any brief comments right now? We'll come back to the committee. Okay, Councilor Grant, thanks for your patience.
Thank you, no problem. I just wanted to add a couple of words about the importance of understanding what oversight and accountability means. And I reached out to you earlier today, Ben, and I'm going to send you and Jean some links that I would like to recommend be sent out to all the community members, but have the two of you review it first and then just ask any questions. One of the links would be to the training that we received from NACOL when I was on the police commission, and these are also posted trainings for the public or anyone who's interested in this topic to view. And NACOL being the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And it really goes through the best practices of oversight and accountability it goes into the importance and purpose of them, which I think is really greatly misunderstood in our community. The perception that oversight and accountability keeps officers from wanting to work in the Burlington has been very disturbing to me. And I think that comes from a lack of understanding in the public. And sometimes on the city council as a commissioner, I was very concerned about incorrect information that was being given to the public, no matter how inadvertently. I was concerned about some of the attacks that were made against the commission. So I'd like to provide some documentation that will help provide some education so that we can, that this joint committee can move forward in coming up with a best possible solution for Burlington. One of the items in NADACO documents and in any conversation currently about oversight and accountability is that there are no two bodies in the country that are exactly alike. So I know the term previously was thrown around as an experiment. Well, there are best practices and there are goals that that are common, that are shared. And I have some information about New Haven, Connecticut and what they do. And I think they would be a great case study. One of the commissioners in New Haven, Connecticut was a speaker at the Flynn event a couple of months ago. That was very interesting that people attended, and was also someone who was on Obama's committee regarding the 21st century policing. So I was really impressed with her conversation, her talking about what their commission was doing and how they worked with their police department and hiring and many other things. And I started studying the New Haven department. So I'm just going to put out that information and hopefully we can share it, review it. And I think it has a lot of great information and ideas, and I think makes this less scary for some people. This scares people because they think that this will chase away police officers. And I always come back to, well, what type of police officers do we want working in Burlington? That's all I wanted to say for now. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. I will say that I see a couple other people on the attendee side. If there's anyone on the attendee side that wants to be promoted to being a panelist, please go ahead and use your raise hand function. And I think we could just do that if anyone raises their hand, and we can move people over to the panelist side. And folks who are here from the public by no means should feel obligated to make a comment at this point in time. I totally respect that folks may be here still in listening and information gathering mode, but Jordan, I mentioned we may come to you next. Appreciate your being here on behalf of the mayor's office. I don't know if you have any comments at this point in time or.
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I am as the mayor is approaching this work in process, we are going to approach the drafting of a charter change and commission and ordinance and hoping that the draft will include we're hoping we've established 3 principles that we hope will guide the work and this process, and I'll share those with the committee, and I know that the mayor plans to share a memo with the full committee and commission about his goals for the process. But these are the 3 overarching principles that we've developed that we hope will guide this work. So the first one is that we should consider codifying in ordinance and charter the police commission's new authorities, so the things that they've already been doing through the police commission policy with respect to reviewing complaints, really formalize that through ordinance and potential charter as necessary. And then as we formalize those police commission responsibilities and authorities, we also need to clarify and establish the procedural justice protections to ensure that officers are treated fairly. And then the third and last principle is that we should address the existing charter that undermines the mayor's ability to perform the core charter duties, which is to be the chief executive of the city and to be the chief peace officer of the city and avoid creating new conflicts within the city's governance system. So, because from our perspective, the existing charter is the way the existing charter is established, where the chief has sole authority over the police department in a way that is really removed from the mayor, is problematic. We hope that that is addressed through this process. So those are the three principles, and then there are more specific ways that we think those principles could be achieved that we will share in writing, hopefully in advance of the next meeting. Thank you, Beth, for the opportunity to share that.
Thanks, Jordan. Andy, I see you have your hand raised, but just briefly, but before turning to you, just because there's a couple of counselors that asked some questions of Acting Chief Murad and perhaps the best opportunity to engage him and the members of the department. And first of all, Chief, I want to express my gratitude for being here and being at the table as we continue to discuss this issue. And I don't know if you came prepared perhaps to answer those questions, and by no means you feel obligated to give the answer, but you heard a couple questions as to how we can best engage the department. I don't know if you have any initial thoughts as it may help guide some of the other comments that we hear as well.
Well, I heard a question from Councilor Shannon around what it is that we currently do. I think that's a question worth exploring and the way the system currently works, but I also don't want to take up too much time with that explanation. I have, there's a lot of it that's available online to the public right now. We have a flow chart, 2 flow charts that are available online that show both the progression of citizen complaints and the progression of a use of force incident and how that gets reviewed. Both of which overlap, and clearly use of force is a significant component of our concerns around citizen complaints, although by no means is it even nearly the lion's share of the citizen complaints we get. We get about 45 citizen complaints a year. 15 of those, a third of them, are invalid on their face. They are for places like Burlington, Iowa, or Burlington, Ontario. They are clearly driven by mental health issues, or they are mistaken incidents of people offering a criminal complaint via the citizen complaint portal. So they're saying, my wallet got stolen, can you do something about it? The other 30, we take very seriously, and every single one of those goes to the police commission. The police commission is able to review and discuss every single one of those. I don't want to go further into the sort of the flow chart here, although I have both of them, so you can't read it, but there's a flow chart here of how a citizen complaint comes in and what occurs. And then there's a slightly more complex flow chart of a use of force and what happens once you use force if that happens. So I would love the opportunity to share that information, and perhaps I'll do it via email rather than talking about it here. The next question that Councilor Shannon asked and that Councilor Hightower also echoed is sort of a discussion about how would we engage the department. And I think it's a terrific idea to move beyond me and to move beyond the BPOA e-board. Although I think the BPOA is an important participant. I'm glad to participate, but how do we get other officers? It is a survey could be a method to do that, some sort of instrument, but we have to know what our questions are. And right now, I don't think we're anywhere near that, right? I think that the mayor has just articulated some really important guiding points. We have a lot of history, all the materials that you shared, Councilor Travers. I mean, I printed them out, right? And I had to use the heavy duty stapler to get through it. So there's a lot of material here. And what are the specific questions we're asking? Because before we attempt to engage them, at least through a survey instrument, we need to know that. With regard to the BPOA, I am typing an email to the BPOA right now saying, that they should be at the table for this as they were for the discussions around the CNA report and as they were for the committee to review policing practices that began from then Councilor Roof's recommendation in 2019. And I'm hopeful that they will agree to do that, but as Councilor Shannon also mentioned, they're stretched, but this is important work. So that's all I've got. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks. Yeah. Joe?
I just have a question. When we're talking about oversight, are we talking about the police department, or are we only talking about sworn officers? Or just wondered.
I mean, my sense is that it's about the operation of the department, and so where if that could be CSOs, those are not sworn officers, those could be the CSLs, they could be dispatchers. It's not to say that they will be, and I think that the comments that were made by Councillor Hightower in terms of wanting us to focus, it's going to be really good, but I do not see our charge as being limited unless we decide it is appropriate to limit it so that we can get to what we need to do. But
I just wanted that clarification because I think it's important to recognize BPOA does not represent everybody in the department. So if we're talking about everybody in the department, we want to make sure that we.
it is why, asked me was part of the invite list, right? And will continue to be, and we have to do as good a job. I was expecting to have lots of people here, so we obviously have to do a better job of reaching out because they're big players.
Well, I think it's also reflective of just how many hours everybody's working, how thin everyone is stretched as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I would just add that that's a question that I hope it is resolved through this process. It's one that's come up as we've expanded the number of roles in the police departments that are not sworn officers. And presently, Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if a complaint came through the complaint portal regarding an employee that wasn't a sworn officer, the process for addressing that is not established in the same way that it is for a sworn police officer.
No, regrettably, I don't think that's the case. I think so. But
so someone makes a complaint against a
100%.
Dispatcher through the portal, it's
Yes.
referred to the police commission.
100%.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So you're absolutely correct that there are some growing pains going on with this as the ratio of the department changes from one that was predominantly sworn and still is and still will be, but one that is has a larger and larger component of professional staff. Because of this, I just had this conversation with Chief Sherling, and Chief Sherling understood, as I did and as other predecessors did, that every employee in the police department was under the aegis of the police chief insofar as dealing with discipline, et cetera. However, the changing ratios may cause a revisitation of that, but for the time being, yes, dispatchers, parking was a part of
maybe
the
clarification and I would want to make is that, and maybe you don't want to get to the details of this now, but that if maybe the complaint goes to the police commission, but the police commission wouldn't necessarily advise on discipline for that employee that was an unsworn.
We're currently dealing with a CSO complaint right now, a complaint about some actions that a CSO took. We've certainly done it with dispatchers, and I too have had internally generated complaints against dispatchers that required discipline, and that discipline was discussed with the police commission.
Okay.
And we follow the exact same rules that we follow. The agreement that we arrived at in 2020, it was worked on. It had been built earlier. There was work done in years prior, but it was largely in 2020 done by then Police Commissioner Sharif Hart and interim police chief Jen Morrison. I finished that work with the police commission and signed it with the police commission in August of 2020. That document is titled it is titled employees. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it here before.
And I don't want to.
But
I think
role of the Burlington Police Commissioner in reviewing complaints against BPD employees. So,
Okay,
sorry.
no, I think if there's any common theme I'm hearing thus far, it's that we have a need for a committee for some very directed information gathering at our meetings to come. So I think that'll be a part of it. And the two PDFs that you just mentioned.
I saw that you were.
I already emailed it to Joe to ask if they be put up on board docs so people have access to them. So
And so I wish I'd recommended it earlier because there's a third, which is also on the website, which is this role of the police commission in reviewing complaints against BPD employees.
okay,
And that document too should be circulated in the same way as the documents that you just added.
great. We'll get that up on board docs as well. I see Andy, you've been very patient, so I want to make sure we turn to you, and then Councilor Grant will come to you, and then see if there's the extent to which, and I'm sure there will be other members of the public that want to comment. So Andy, thanks very much for your patience.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you bringing everybody to the table on this. I've been following this as a union member at Howard Center since 2020. I'm really excited to see that there is some energy to get something to change the current situation that we're in. It's abundantly clear that if this has been a 3-year-long pressure from the public, that obviously something has to be done. And I think that being thoughtful about that's what my coworkers, fellow members here have requested, that people be thoughtful about it. You know, a lot of work has been put in over 3 years to be incredibly thoughtful as well. So I'm excited to kind of review with most folks that are going to be coming to this table about what exactly that's been. And I also think that really what Zariah was saying earlier, to be looking at the specific pieces first that you know that you're going to have to spend more time working on at the beginning is going to be important, and to make sure, as Milo Grant said, to explain that clearly to people and make sure that's understood well. You know, I work at Howard Center, so this does impact the police. This is also going to impact us. We have been looking at what has been going on for 3 years. We're invested to see that there is a good solution made. And our brothers and sisters over at 1343, AFSCME 1343, I'm hoping to touch base with them as well, so that we can all be on the same page about what it is that folks in Burlington need. We serve people in Burlington. That's what my job is. I'm also incredibly overworked right now. Everyone at Howard Center is, and I'm really excited to see who's going to come to the table to collaborate on this, because this is incredibly important.
Thank you, Andy, and really appreciate you and members of your union being part of the discussion. Councilor Grant, you have a comment, then we'll turn to the other folks here.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick comment that yes, the police commission reviews complaints, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the police commission agrees with department determinations. And that's going to be part of this process in terms of how do we address those differences in the best interest of residents who are complainants. And that I've said it many times before, and I'll just add it again, it's not always about punishment. Sometimes it's about an acknowledgement that maybe reviewing training, an apology, how things could have been handled better to improve community engagement and community trust, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we now turn here in the room? Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment or statement? Yeah, Amy.
Yeah, so Amy, I think this is probably a bit of an echo of maybe what Jean was
I'm sorry, what's her last name, baby?
Melanowski. So it's a bit of echo, I think, of what Jean was sharing, but just really asking the question, like, is the extent of plans for public input these meetings, or is part of these meetings planning methods for more public input? So really, how are we getting a rigorous, quote unquote, robust public input that's diverse, that's inclusive, and that's really shared transparently. I'm thinking childcare, translation, meeting folks where they're at, not public forum or meetings like this that are really inaccessible. And like, I know this meeting is put together really quickly, and I'm always compassionate towards humans, but I just want to name that, like, for starters, I don't think this meeting was on Front Porch Forum and is right now in conflict with an NPA meeting that's about public safety that my neighbors had to choose between. So, and then the second thing I would say is, and I don't think this is a wild thing to say, I think a lot of people are in agreement on this. I can count the number of times the mayor has said that this needs to happen, but don't believe the police chief should have sole authority. So let me really clear that from the perspective of people for police accountability, that end goal should be a charter change, and anything other than that feels performative. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Anyone else here in the room?
I got a few things I'd like to say if I could.
Yeah, please.
Well, here's get the scene a little
Yeah.
better. So my name is Dave Marr. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and speak. I've lived in the Broughton area for almost 50 years. And I currently live in the New North End. Must say, it seems like you have a lot of stuff on your plate coming up to deal with any improvement in police oversight. So I have a suggestion that I hope will be helpful. My suggestion is to create a peer review board in the police department, which would be the first step in addressing any excessive use of force complaints. The board might consist of several senior police officers, maybe human resources, and maybe a police union representative. The board would review the incident and propose disciplinary action if warranted. This would be in form of a binding decision or a recommendation to the police chief. Whatever action would be taken could be appealed to the city's oversight board once it's established. I think this has several benefits over some other concepts. The first is that it's always best to solve a problem as close as possible to the source. That way the people who are most familiar with the problem can come up with a solution. It's a business best practice. Now I know a lot of people are probably skeptical about having the police themselves, but we have a new police chief, a new police department to some extent, and I've seen evidence that training has been improved. So I think it's possible to do this as a first step. The second benefit is that the disciplinary action would have been reviewed by a number of individuals experienced in police work. So that way it has more meat behind it, as opposed to the current process. And this should reduce the number of incidents that are then reviewed by the oversight board. I think this could also possibly be implemented more quickly than the oversight board and might not need a charter change depending on how it's implemented. So this is just a concept, hope you'll consider. It obviously needs some more detail. It's something worth thinking about, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Joe, I'm putting you on the spot. Are you?
I don't think I have anything to add right now.
Okay.
Everybody said,
Great, perfect. Anyone else online who has another comment at this point in time? Sorry, I think I saw your hand raised.
That's Jessica.
Or Jessica, I don't know if you had.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I realized I didn't know Jessica. I don't think has had the chance to speak. If she
Okay.
has.
No, I don't have anything to add at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Ben, you know this because I
Oh.
texted you and I think Sarah mentioned it, but I do think, I guess, just because we haven't discussed it too much, I do wonder if we want to focus on disciplinary in the next meeting, not to tell the chairs how to do their job. And then I know that the citizen process focused a lot on citizen complaints, which makes sense. But I also know that in the CNA report, there was a lot of reference to the ways that we're not doing best practice in internal affairs. So I wonder if we want to consider that as well. And I would really like if Karen Durfee from HR were here again, I think to give us a better sense of first level, second level complaints, how they're handled for non-sworn officers across the city, and how we, and I think because I think that is the best. I think we should try to make, I believe a goal of ours should be to try to make this more comparable to other city departments. And so I would greatly appreciate if she were part of that process. Thank you.
Great. Andy, is your hand raised from before, just to confirm, or?
No, this is a new hand request.
All right, so why don't we go to your new hand and then Shkuntala, I'm sorry, and we'll come to you.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I just really want to emphasize that workers from Howard Center feel like we have an abundance of oversight. And we take serious precautions in terms of the folks that we are called in to provide services for and serve and support. I have heard from many, many members that work at Howard Center that it is to have an independent oversight feels incredibly necessary at this point in terms of the safety of community members in Burlington. And I also know I'm not saying anything new at all. But I just really want to make that abundantly clear that we work in Burlington. We are getting priced out of Burlington, but some of us still get a chance to live there. And that's where we serve a huge chunk of the people that we provide services to. And I think that both workers would like to feel like there's a way to have accountability when there are instances in which workers are interacting with police officers. And I think that clients have also expressed that they would like to see that as well. So overall, an independent oversight board with authority is incredibly essential at this point. So just my 2 cents, whether that becomes an ordinance or a charter, that's up to y'all to decide.
Thanks, Andy. And Shkuntala, sorry.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. I've been taking notes here as well. I think the only thing I can speak to right now, since I haven't actually had time to go over all the attachments you sent us, I did start working on them. Is since we are talking about the police commission, and I've heard everybody speak to that, it seems like there is whether an expansion of the role or reiteration of what we're already doing. I suggest that one is that perhaps you may consider having one of the commissioners or several commissioners, I don't know if Commissioner Oski wants to chime in on this as well, be a regular member of this committee, or at least be invited on a regular basis, not just one presentation from us. I feel like we are very integral to the process and our voice should be on the table pretty much. This is like my opinion, and that's something I think we can discuss with the commission too, in a more proactive and regular manner, not just a one-time thing. So that would be my opinion. Also, I would seriously like the councilors to consider and Councilor Bergman's already touched on that, the matter of resource. So that's something to think about as you expand our role or change it in. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Sarah.
Couple things. In our discussions around the role of police commission, and I want us to have a focus question on my opinion. I view the police commission as an independent oversight body. So I just want to just sort of toss that question out there, because I think we've got to have a discussion. Is it, some people feel it's not, I happen to feel this, but to have that discussion. The other thing though, I really want to, we in 2020, 21, we spent a tremendous amount of time on the CNA report and a parallel community engagement. We hired a consultant, really went out to get opinions of the community. And I want us not to forget that we spent a ton of time and resources and work on that. And so maybe one of us can synopsize some of that. One of the CNA finding in particular, not the whole 154 recommendations, but Are there some things in that that we should know about that relate to the topic in particular of discipline? Because I think that'd be helpful. And then on the community engagement side, you know, we spent a lot of time to try to reach out to a really broad array of folks. What did they say? What did they suggest? We're not gonna have, I believe, the time and resources to reproduce that whole community engagement process that we went through a year and a half ago, but we should see if there's anything in that report that we should be looking at.
So unless there's other comments, I think that may be a good segue to our next agenda item, which is to talk about sort of next steps and where we go from there. And I can envision one of those next steps being some more information gathering around what CNA did, what the consultants did over the course of the last couple of years. But before turning to that question of next steps, are there any other general comments outside of that? Or Jean, is you're thinking that that would be a good segue into talking about those next steps?
I think we should go and talk about these next steps.
Okay, great, there we go. So we have about 20 minutes left here until we hit 7:30. And
I am wondering, Soraya has proposed, I happen to agree, that we should start with discipline. You know, it's not the only thing that we'll deal with, but, and I'm wondering if you have given a little bit more thought, given some thought as to what that would mean for us to do at our next meeting.
Yeah, I do think that, again, I think I don't want to put her on the spot, but I do think she knows this is coming because we talked about it in the HR meeting. And because I know is our next meeting only 4 days away, or is that the South?
next ordinance committee meeting is 4 days away, but we won't talk about this.
Okay, so she'll have time. So I do think that having one, I'm happy to give a presentation, or I don't know if Karen's still on, she's not. But I know that Karen and I can easily give a presentation on the CNA report, and I'm definitely happy to give a report on the Talitha outcomes, or at least to share that as materials so people have a chance to review them. I think Karen giving a better understanding of how discipline happens in the rest of the city, so that we get that overview will be a good point to start the discussion. And then I think we should, after we get that presentation, I think we should come to some kind of decision about what folks we want to focus on, if it's just the sworn officers, if it's the whole BPD. So that would be my recommendation, but I'm not going to say I've spent oodles of time on this.
Okay. So then.
And I do see Milo's hand raised, just so you know.
Yeah, sorry, Milo, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to piggyback that, Zoraya, maybe you and I can work together. I was also part of that joint committee, the police commission and the city council public safety committee. I went to almost every public engagement that there was during this process. I also represent the police commission at the city council public safety committee, where there was a review of the CNA recommendations. I do recommend for any city councilor that has not had a chance to review those recommendations in full, that at least read through it once, because I think it's very important with regards to this process. Thank you so much.
Joe.
So as you know, I cannot be at the next meeting.
Right.
So I would appreciate it if the next meeting was primarily informational, gathering the various pieces of information that we've talked about, as well as gathering public input, as well as we have been charged with that, not just looking at the public input that was previously done, because honestly, I think that this has been an evolving topic, and people's view isn't necessarily the same as what it was. So I think it is important for this committee to do what we can with regards to public engagement. So whatever happens at the next meeting, I assume everything's being videotaped and I will participate that way.
Okay. Great. Personally, my sense is that the next meeting should be dedicated to information gathering, and I'd like for us to try to come to some consensus as to what that information should be. I'm mindful of the fact that I believe our next meeting, which is scheduled for May 23rd, conflicts with a police commission meeting that evening, if I'm not mistaken. So I think for that reason as well, it needs to be an informational gathering meeting for the committee. And then no doubt continuing perhaps to gather even more information after that, in no small part from the police commission as well. And I agree with your points, that police commission obviously needs to be an integral part of this as we move forward. So if folks are generally in agreement and speak out if you feel differently, that our next meeting should be dedicated to our collecting additional information by having some sort of dedicated agenda items. Should we come up with a list? And we've heard from some folks about the type of information they would like to hear. We've heard some about CNA report and the Talitha consultants. I could go back through my list here of the other items for us to collect information from. We've heard from the folks. You know, Sarah, you were mentioning some other items as well. Yeah, Joan.
Will we have a website for this committee? Because I think it would be helpful to have a landing spot for all these various pieces of information for ducks, as we know, is hard to go back and find the documents that you know are there. And so if we, I'm sorry, Joe.
I can do it. I'll figure it out.
It is essentially, it's essential, actually. And you look at the work that we did on all.
So just want to finish my thought, which is having the CNA report and the Talitha report in addition to the items that are on our agenda now, as well as all the items that that we're going to be asking for, and the video of each of our meetings on that site. The chief referenced a number of things that are available on their website. That should probably also be included. Okay.
So I just want to say, having a website, having it, the translation, the experience that we had with CETO in terms of the all resident voting was amazing. There were never any questions that we weren't doing a job to reach out. That also included reaching out to the Trusted Voice Community Voices group and some other folks, so that we want to consider that. So I just want to second that. And in terms of engagement, I mean, I've always seen the commission as being absolutely necessary all the time here. You know, I mean, you're not on the joint committee, but you're sitting at the table because you're the focus of so much of what we're looking at. So
do you understand, maybe the commission should have a conversation and appoint two of you, or I'm just saying that, you know, to come regularly and really relay liaison stuff, because I agree with Jean.
I mean, I think that having the next meeting focus on discipline, having those parts of the other reports that were already done is a part of that. The current system we should have a conversation about that. The proposals that are on the table and that are part of our charge, we should have a conversation. That's part of the information gathering. You know, mayor put forward in a proposal related to discipline. That's, you know, information gathering is to know what that is. There were, you know, comments made on the draft ordinance that were made by the commission, and those are highlighted there. And then the public, particularly if we post it up, can send comments in. We have got also, although it was defeated, it is part of the packet, the two oversight models, one that was vetoed by the mayor and one that the people brought forward. And so there are components of discipline that becomes part of our information gathering and understanding what those are about and why that they were promoted, you know, because it's just part of the process of gathering the information. So that's what I would see us doing the HR, you know, and obviously I think Zariah has hit it also with the getting the HR director Durfee to come and talk about the rest of the city. And I mean, there may, or there is more out there, but I think that that's a lot of stuff that we would just go through that.
If I could just ask a clarifying question, I'm trying to understand I'm not just so that I can work with Director Durfee in preparing for an upcoming meeting. Can you help me understand the rationale for understanding how discipline works for other city employees? Is that's the ask, right? To understand how it works for other city employees. And I'm struggling to understand the rationale for doing that, just because we've determined that police officers in the police department, because they use force, are different and are subject to different disciplinary standards. So I'm just struggling to understand the connection for.
Could we have Soraya and or Milo, if they're there, talk about that, since they're the ones that raised that directly?
Can I just say that, like, for myself, I think it's important to understand the discipline structure of the city and understand how the police are different. And it's just part of the bigger picture to look at, not necessarily that we want to go to the discipline model that everyone has, but understand. I think it's helpful just to understand what it is for our bigger picture view.
I do too, and we're talking about a whole range of discipline, and I think after we understand it all, there's certainly issues around use of force, which are very different than most of the other disciplinary issues. But there's a lot of stuff in between that will be helpful to understand. And I think I sense that perhaps at a lower level, if I want to call it that, understanding how, you know, what happens if another city employee is rude or discriminatory to somebody, how is that typically handled? So it's just sort of, I think, getting the context of how that works and how is it different.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, one, again, I just want to call out that it doesn't feel like our processes in the police department based on the CNA report are best practice across the board. So I think at least getting them, if they're not up to where they are in the rest of the city, is kind of the minimum of what we should be doing. So when we say that they're different, I don't know if that means that we say that we want it to be less defined or more like less clear, is essentially what the CNA report was calling it, and putting a lot of the onus on police officers in terms of, like, I don't know if folks read the CNA report in depth, but one of the things was that in order to have an internal complaint, it was almost the onus on individual officers to do an investigation before they really brought the complaint forward, which that's just not what should be happening. And so I think baseline, whether it's external to the city or within, city staff, having this, like, the same level of processes that we have for the rest of the city, I think is going to be important. I think we can always make the decision if it's appropriate for the police department, once we know what that is, but I think making that in a vacuum is not, I don't think that serves us well. And I actually think that having some consistency across city staff will help HR a lot too, and will be great. And then I also, yeah, I think that Karen just also has a little bit more insight into like how things have been handled when they do rise to the level of the HR director.
I just want to say, I strongly agree with what was just said. Because when we look at some of these things that are current practice, we have to understand that some of these things that are current practice are not best practice. And that's caused at times conversations to be adversarial, for lack of a better word. Thank you.
So if that's been answered, there are 2 points that I want to bring up. One is around engagement. I referenced the work that the Charter Change Committee did with CEDO on all resident voting. We're in a sort of a different position than I think that that committee and that issue in some fashion. I think it is possible that we are going to need some funds, or that funds would be helpful for us. There are still monies in the councilor initiative, the city council initiative, and this is clearly a priority for the city council. I don't think that an allocation, I think there was a last note from CAO, she had $40,000. I know that Tuke is asking for $5,000 for symposium on the burning of biomass. So I don't think that $5,000, at least as an initial ask, would be too much to ask for to help us get translation services, get outreach into the community, possibly engage CEDO staff. They had money to do that in their budget, but this is not their budget there. So, maybe RIB. So I want to raise that. And the other thing in terms of discipline that I hadn't thought about, but which is clear, and I'm not exactly sure who can what people should be raising this, but the whole question of qualified immunity is a cloud, or is as a factor over the use of force and the way that officers act. And I have a personal opinion about qualified immunity, but it clearly, in terms of information gathering, and I don't really know it's how it has manifested. So, in terms of our culture, our practice, I know that it is out there in the world and has had dramatic impacts on policing in the United States, and is why it was such a big topic of conversation and study in the legislature last year. So it's something, whether it's too much for us to chew at the next meeting, but I do think that you cannot look at police discipline without looking at the role that qualified immunity plays. So I want to just get that out on the table.
I'm not gonna lie, I would prefer we didn't touch qualified immunity to begin with. And again, if this becomes a rolling basis of things that we look at, I agree that it touches it, and I agree it's an important issue. And I just want us to get something across and passed. And I think if we save that to the end, that would serve us well. Or if we, because I think it is a really complicated issue, and there's a lot of state interplay that we're going to have to work with if we tackle that. And I don't want us to get too bogged down in it.
I appreciate that.
I just getting back to the information gathering, and I recognize we have a long list already, but I had 2 thoughts for what they're worth. One, Soraya mentioned the CNA and best practices with respect to internal investigations, and just wanted to note that the Vermont State Police has an internal affairs office, and it might be worth learning more about how their internal affairs division operates. I'm not aware of another law enforcement agency in Vermont that has one. And then the second issue is, and this maybe is something that I can learn on my own through city resources, how fire department handles disciplinary issues. Be interested in learning about that, but perhaps that's something I can do on my own.
Great.
I would agree that way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to throw one more thing on the pile. The state oversight body, which I can never remember the name of that council.
Justice Council.
Yes, the Phil Sorrell chairs. I think it would be helpful to hear from them and consider what their role might be in our oversight.
Great. So mindful of time here, sounds like there's broad consensus here with respect to getting an invitation out to HR Director Durfee with respect to current disciplinary processes for other city employees. I would propose that we put that on the agenda, or try to put that on the agenda for a meeting on May 23rd. And would be happy to ask Director Durfee to invite anyone else to come along with her that she would like on that point. I think another point that we've heard is with respect to CNA to leave the consultants. Zariah, I think I heard you volunteer yourself with respect to that report, but if you have other thoughts on that, and we could ask Karen as well. Okay, thumbs up. Are you good with my asking Karen as well, see if she wants to come in to speak to it? Okay, and Joe, I know you did a bit of work on that as well, so we'd be happy to have you come in too. I think for our meeting on May 30th, which won't happen much longer after the 23rd, obviously want the police commission to be again an integral part of this process going forward, but I think it would be helpful to hear from the police commission, particularly Commissioner Sequino, if she's able to make it, and Councilor Grant, you as well, sort of folks who were on the commission when this ordinance language was reviewed last, to provide feedback on that language and your own thoughts on a body on this on the May 30th meeting. I think we've heard a lot about sort of what are other entities doing. So sort of under that umbrella, Vermont State Police, Vermont Criminal Justice Council. And personally, I would like to hear a lot about what other communities are doing about this as well. Councilor Grant, you pointed out that you may send some links about what some other cities and communities are doing. I know NACOL, obviously, that this is their job here, is what other communities are doing. So I'd be curious to know whether or not, we could talk about this after the meeting, folks have connections with NACOL representatives who may very well be willing to come and speak to this committee as well. I'd personally be interested in that. But for the purposes of building the agenda on the 23rd, I think we have current disciplinary processes as an agenda item, and a review of sort of the CNA report to lead the consultants. I think that would actually take up a good chunk of our meeting, but the folks in the committee want to add any other agenda item to those two right there.
Okay.
Okay. So why don't we plan on that, and then Shakuntala and Jessica, I think I was emailing with Stephanie earlier today about, I'm sorry about the conflict on the 23rd, but on the 30th, I think it would be great to sort of have a more formal presentation to begin and continue the discussion going forward with the commission. Yeah.
This is in the vein of, I just think we have so much work to do. We're now going to move to September. I would like us to set up at least 3 months of meetings, which is a god awful task, but so we don't conflict with police commission or any other things, and we get our oar in first. So our meetings become priority. So I'm looking at poor Joe there, but I just think you can always take them off the calendar, but getting them on a calendar is.
I think maybe why don't Jean and I connect and then run dates by Kim, and then we'll sort of start there and get a universe dates, and we can send out I despise doodle polls, but we could send out a doodle poll, maybe,
Oh,
unless
we
someone
can
has a
work.
better idea, okay? Does that work?
And we can also talk about engagement. Which we don't have to do in a big group, but
Yeah, why don't we put that on the agenda for the 23rd as well?
And I think this meeting dates, the forums or, what other forums?
and resources, again, because it happens with people and things that require money, so.
Well, speaking of which, yeah, we did conflict with another forum on police oversight that's going on right now, hosted by the wards 5 and 6 NPAs, that started at 6:30 and it's going until 8:30. So if folks have not gotten their fill of the oversight accountability discussion, you can, I think, tune in to the Ward 6 NPA probably right now.
I have
Yeah,
one
go
other,
to-
so it sounds like, since none of us will be here on the 23rd. We will confer in our meeting on the 23rd as to what our position is as in terms of liaison and having a liaison. And bring it to the table on the 30th. Am I understanding that correct?
I think that'd be perfect. If people agree with that.
I know the Commissioner Oski, do you have anything to add to that? Do you think that's workable?
No, I think that sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And of course, we'd be looking forward to your substantive thoughts on the proposals that have already been put out at the table.
Right, I was thinking more on the 30th would be kind of
Yes.
the starting point and.
Yep.
View what we have.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Gene or any other committee members, any other thoughts?
No, I think you and I will work to make sure that our engagement is robust.
Not gonna get over that, are we?
Oh. I didn't draft that resolution, so you need to give it back.
To that resolution.
Didn't draft that, didn't vote for that resolution.
If you look at that word, then we can go.
I like robust.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
We'll use it a lot.
Okay. All right, well, appreciate everyone's contributions tonight, appreciate people who came here in person and online, and then I think without seeing any other business, we'll call the meeting adjourned without any objection. And we'll plan on seeing folks on the 23rd. Joan, have an excellent vacation. We'll have the meeting recorded. Yeah, you can watch it on your show.
Good for long planning.
Really? Well, I will be on. Joe, you know.